I hate nagging. That's not a controversial statement, but when I say it, I don't mean that I hate nagging people, and I don't hate being nagged. I hate it as a concept. I hate that it happens anywhere to anyone. At some point in my life, I formed this mental image of a husband, a man, who is tired from work, who's just trying to sit down and relax for a while, and his woman, his wife, is badgering him about something that is really bothering her. So it just becomes this moment where these two people hate each other, who should love each other, who should be happily married and working together on this problem. Instead, they aren't feeling any love for each other at all. They just hate each other in that moment and what they're doing to each other. For as long as I've had this idea of nagging, this cultural archetype that developed in my mind from watching sitcoms and dramas, I knew that I never wanted to do that in a marriage. Like, to be on either end of that, I thought would just be hell. So I've been sort of really focused on this issue for a lot of my life, trying to avoid it, trying to figure out why is it happening and just prevent it as much as possible. If you've watched this channel for a while, you probably know that I am very interested in sex differences, the ways that men typically, on average, differ from women psychologically, and how those differences can be traced back to our different roles in the history of mankind, going back to prehistory even, or I should say especially in prehistory. Sometime in the 20th century, this idea became popular among intellectuals that we don't have any of this structure in our brains that helps us to learn and helps us to that has any intrinsic personality traits or any intrinsic sex differences in our psychology, and that everything that is different about men and women in our personalities is simply taught to us, that it's all learned in our environments, in our culture, and then if we can only change the culture enough, then we can make men and women identical in their brains at the very least. And so where you have people making this assumption, especially intellectuals who are writing influential books or having influential podcasts, you'll get a lot of misunderstandings especially about dynamics between the sexes, that any differences between men and women are simply arbitrary and can be changed if we can only change the culture enough. This idea of gender roles within a family is thought to be very patriarchal, thought to be part of our culture.
Women will go home earlier from work. They will be the ones who know their children's teachers, their friends' names, who manage the household schedule, who pack for vacations, who plan for vacations, who just generally assume like director of the household on top of whatever actual job they're doing.
And that the only reason women are stereotyped as being the ones who take care of the home and take care of the children is just because that was convenient for men, and because men had the power, they forced women to do these irritating, boring jobs that the men didn't want to do. But although women don't exactly love doing housework, they don't love cleaning clothes and washing dishes and changing nappies exactly, there is a kind of average psychological difference between men and women that makes, I believe, these tasks at least more tolerable for women and more satisfying. They're more gratifying for women to take on than for her partner. Typically, in an average relationship, these are tasks associated with the home, associated with children, that will be more fulfilling and less tiresome for women to take part in. And these days, with podcasts, with music, with TV, these are, taking care of your home and taking care of your children shouldn't be extremely tiresome and extremely boring. There's always something you can have on to keep yourself entertained. We live in an age of unprecedented technology that helps us to clean our homes and clean our clothes. And yes, it can take hours and hours, and you're doing the same things over and over again. But it shouldn't really be that hard for two adult people to take care of their own home, and yet it becomes this constant source of grief with married people. And to research this video, I looked into basically people's complaints about their marriage on the internet, in forums, on videos, people just chatting. I listened to people talking about their relationships a lot and really tried to pay attention to what it is that they are complaining about.
You know what needs to give you the ick? When you find yourself nagging him. Like, ugh, I hate that feeling, like having to remind a person to do something over and over again. The moment you catch yourself doing that to people, they gotta go. Especially when it's your partner, okay? If he is putting you in nagging energy, if he is bringing out the worst in you, because let's face it, we don't like ourselves when we nag. There are plenty of good men who don't need to be asked to do what they're supposed to be doing, okay? It would already be done. And more, like they would go the extra mile. So men who are not acts of service men, it's an ick, okay? Like, what do you mean you're not gonna do this for me? Like, what are you here for then? Time to make space, okay? Stop being with men who hate you. Bestie, wake up!
And I started to notice something that I didn't see anyone else talking about. All of these relationship experts and marriage experts, people who go on these big podcasts and write books about housework, they seem to be missing a piece of the puzzle. And it's not just sex differences, that it's not just this idea that maybe there is some justification to women doing more work in the home than their husbands, but that also there's this attraction element that I want to address in this video. I wrote a thread about it on Twitter that was mildly controversial and it had a big reach.
I have this crazy notion that women don't care as much about doing a disproportionate amount of housework and childcare as they say they do. I think in many cases the real grievance is that they don't like taking care of a man who's playing video games and watching TV. For men whose wives are nagging them about chores, I want to know, what are your hobbies? What are you doing while your wife is doing housework? Woodworking, bowling, writing a novel, playing music, seeing your friends, calling your mother, volunteering in your community. Maybe women are just sick of seeing their men sitting on a sofa for hours a day. The idea that adults need hours of sedentary rest is a product of modern entertainment culture. It makes even less sense when you consider that a lot of modern jobs are desk-based. Whether male or female, I'm a bit tired of hearing people say that they are too tired to take care of their children or do chores. Your ancestors had a lot more work to do than this, and in much harsher conditions. If you take on more activity, your body adapts to the extra load. The response from Philosophicat puts the matter in even starker light than I did. The quickest way to lose the respect of a woman is to be perceived as working less hard than she is. This applies across the board. If a man has time to veg out in front of screens for several hours and she doesn't, she'll perceive him as lazy and unhelpful. If she trains harder than he does at the gym, she'll see him as undisciplined and slacking off. If he sleeps in later than she does, again, she'll lose respect and see him in an unfavorable light. No woman wants to be with a man who needs a break, especially if she herself manages without ever getting a break. That is a one-way ticket to giving her the ick, to dead bedrooms and no longer seeing him as a man, but an overgrown child. He comes across as weak in her eyes. Men who ignore this reality do so at their peril, and would be better off avoiding relationships until they are willing to rise to the challenge that women will inevitably present.
And especially if you have young children, keeping your home clean is basically a Sisyphean task. Not only are your children just continually making mess in places, and they always need feeding, and they always need, clean clothes to put on. They just create work as they continue to live. They also just distract you from your work constantly. You can never get anything finished without someone, saying that they're thirsty or they're hungry. They have a question. They need to cuddle. They need you to pick them up and never ever put them down. And yet to be taking all that on and rising to the occasion as a woman, I think many women are finding it infuriating to see their husband doing nothing and not stepping up and not doing anything impressive. It's this sedentary rest that I think is a real bugbear in marriage. There's something really infuriating about doing work while seeing someone who is not working, who is resting. And this is the theme I saw so much in women's posts. I think it's safe to say that if there is a recurrent theme in what women find attractive, a man who is watching TV or playing video games is just not on that list. It's just, I'm sorry, not a very attractive thing to do. Now, if you are watching TV with your husband or watching a film together, or if you like video games and you're both playing video games together or separately, that's a different matter. You're kind of absorbed in whatever experiences you're sharing. Maybe you're having a cuddle. It's like a nice moment to share together. But when you're just watching someone watch TV or watching someone scrolling through their phone, it's just not attractive. It's not impressive. Like, nobody's ever made a marble statue of someone doing these activities, or an impressive oil painting of a man who is looking at his phone. This is something that I think women look for in men that men don't have the same. There's not a mirror image of this in men's attraction to women. Men attracted to women who are physically attractive, who have a moderate temperament, who have a sort of caring nature. And yeah, maybe there's a few men who are attracted to really witty, funny, strident women, but that's not actually a typical feature of what men list in their favourite things about women, or indeed what their revealed preferences are by the kinds of women who are very popular with men. But for women, this element of being impressed by a man, of admiring him, is important to attraction. And I think that a lot of these marriage problems that seem to be completely unrelated are perhaps more related than people think. When you see how much our culture is, especially our entertainment, is just intrinsically unimpressive. If you think about how much time we spend on our phones, watching TV or playing video games, instead of what otherwise might have been doing. Even something just as simple as reading books is slightly more impressive than playing video games in terms of how much a woman admires a man. I read one vivid description that a woman gave of her husband. She describes the nest that her husband builds on the sofa on a regular basis. He just accumulates like a pile of dirty plates and cups around him, and his hands are clutched around the controller as he twitches his fingers on the buttons and mutters and swears under his breath. And I don't doubt that there's some exaggeration in this description, and there's obviously he's got his side of the argument as well. I expect he could list off many things that he's done to be able to earn this time for himself where he can do whatever he wants, and why can't she just leave him be? When it comes down to the particulars of exactly what job the man and the woman has, it's obviously different for every single marriage, and how the chores break down, and the hours worked in the day if the man is working nights, or there's so many particulars that can be different in a marriage that it is very difficult to pull apart exactly who should be doing how much housework. But my point in this thread is that I don't think the housework is even really the issue. And if women are complaining about their husbands loafing around too much and not helping, it may not be that she's completely overworked and just needs help. It may be just that she's so infuriated to see her husband in what she finds to be a mildly pathetic or disgusting activity, that she'll just wants him to stop doing that and just do anything else. If you're a man who's being nagged by your wife and you've tried everything to stop it from happening, if you've tried talking about it, if you've tried helping around the house more, if you've tried going to counselling and you're still not able to resolve this, then perhaps you should just try getting a better hobby, get a more impressive hobby. Maybe just meet up with some friends for a drink. Just get out of the house more, take up jogging, take up anything. The way I see it, and this is a very sexist attitude in today's society, the way I see it, a woman's home and her children kind of become her project, her hobby. And this is thinking of it in this way and framing it this way is basically the only way to stay sane as a married woman. Like, you have to take it on as a project, something that you're responsible for, something you can be proud of, something that you find gratifying. And yes, there are different temperaments in women that mean that this will simply not be possible for some women, and they're just going to hate it every step of the way because they're just not interested in doing those things. But I think for most women, it is somewhat gratifying to have a house that's clean, that you can take pride in, that other people can come and be comfortable in. I think that's why women take on housework and don't just, when their husbands refuse to help or just, take too long to help, women often take on extra chores that they don't strictly need to do because they just want their home to be nicer. They want their clothes to be clean in a way that men on average don't seem to care as much about. And unfortunately, this does mean that a woman who is in charge of a household, who has children, especially if she's got a job, she may not have the capacity to take on that many other responsibilities, other hobbies. I think keeping an orderly, comfortable, clean home and having happy, well-fed, healthy children is as good a hobby as anyone could ever hope to have. And it is fun, it is creative, and even if you don't find it fun, listening to a really good podcast can just make it tolerable, at least. And I think many women would be happy to take on more than what they consider their fair share of housework, more of their childcare duties, if their husband was at least an interesting person. And to this, there were a lot of men who understandably came to this thread that I posted on Twitter to say, I worked all day, I worked all week, I worked a night shift. They described to me how difficult their jobs were and how fatigued they were, either mentally or physically, from work. And they say, isn't this enough? Why isn't this enough for her? Why do I need to do more? Why do I need to have an interesting hobby? And to that I say, it's not enough. I'm sorry. If you were single, you were living alone, you don't have to impress anyone. Like, please have whatever hobbies you want. Like, if your wife isn't nagging you and she's happy, then please do whatever you want. But if you've tried everything else and your wife is still nagging you and she's still unhappy, then being more interesting might help. And I think in most cases, women do not get married because the man has a job. Like, having a job, going to work does not entitle you as a man to just use your leisure time as you like for the rest of your life. It sounds harsh, and maybe that means you don't want to get married, and fair enough, because I think if you're not interested in becoming a better person, of constantly being in the act of trying to impress your wife, to try to be more attractive to your wife, I don't think marriage is right for you. As a man or as a woman, it does take commitment. And unfortunately, just having a job is not enough to impress most women. I expect that on your wedding day, I think most wives are not totally in love with the job that their husband has. They're in love with his personality, his creativity, his wit, his conversation, and none of these things that a wife loves about her husband are being displayed when he's playing video games or when he's watching TV on the sofa.
I don't even have any good skills. Like nunchuck skills, bow hunting skills, computer hacking skills. Girls only want boyfriends who have great skills.
Even regardless of marriage or nagging or relationship advice, whether you're a man or a woman, I would query whether you're really satisfied with your life if all you ever aspire to is your job. Like, that's the thing you want to spend your life doing, is your job, and your job is just a vehicle so that you can afford to play video games and just consume media for the rest of your life. Like, is that really all you think you're capable of doing? Is that all that you're satisfied doing with your life? If that was just, this is your life, you're doing this every day forever, and then maybe sometimes you'll take a holiday. I don't really understand people who are satisfied sort of just going through life, doing the bare minimum. Why would you not want to pack your life with as much as you are physically capable of doing? You could be learning a musical instrument, you could be practicing guitar or forming a band, you could be learning another language, or just reading a moderately interesting book, just something more than just the same activity all the time, whether that's playing video games or something else. If all you have in your spare time is just one or two media sources that you like to consume, it's not for me to say whether that's a life well lived or not. If you think that is the best you can get out of life, then please go ahead, but I think that wouldn't be enough for me. And I think for a lot of people who ask themselves that question sincerely, they would not think that was enough. If you're a lumberjack or some job that's extremely physically demanding, I would suggest perhaps that there might be a more aesthetic way to relax. Ways that you can at least appear to be more engaged with your environment and the world around you, rather than the 1,000-yard stare, the complete utter zone out that occurs when someone is absorbed in a screen. So in summary, if you really don't want to help with the housework, or you think you've helped with the housework enough, at least try to be productive. And if you can't be productive, at least be interesting. And if you can't even be interesting, then be aesthetic. And if you're a man who loves video games, I respect that. I like video games. But I think the important thing is to save that for when your wife is relaxing, when she has finished all her work, when she has put the children to bed and she's ready to relax. Then you can make a nest and play your game, and she will probably be less irritated by that than if you do it while she's working. I feel really ridiculous browbeating hypothetical men on the internet through my channel, and I acknowledge that I may be well off the mark here, but I thought I detected something missing, some insight that no one else seems to be making about the dynamics of marriage. It makes me quite sad to see people complaining about their spouses, whether it's men complaining that their wives nag them or women complaining that their husbands are lazy. I find it extremely frustrating because I know how bad the divorce statistics are, and I feel like if people just understood gender dynamics a little bit better, if they understood the psychology of sex differences, then these conversations would be easier to have, and that marriages would be easier to manage with understanding where these different gender roles and expectations come from. A lot of the advice from people who just don't understand gender roles and sex differences is just infuriating, because it just assumes that everything needs to be evenly divided, when I just don't think that's a helpful starting place to start all of our assumptions from. I really hope that people don't take this video personally. If you've been in a really bad relationship, if you're a man, if you're a woman, whatever it is, I'm sure there's lots of people watching this who have been genuinely really ill-used by their spouse, and this advice just sounds like complete nonsense that is useless and it really wouldn't help. But I'm hoping that it will help some people out there to perhaps, it'll help women to understand their own feelings and to stop getting so hung up about the chores when it's not really about the chores. And I'm hoping it'll help some men to understand why their wives might not be too pleased with them all the time. And I really hope that people watching this understand that I'm not saying this to be judgmental, or that I'm just that I think it's fine that women nag their husbands when they're being lazy. I think nagging is a really bad way of resolving conflict. I find it very frustrating that people would end relationships. This is the kind of thing that kills a relationship when it's repeated over day after day, week after week, for years. It's just something that in olden times people might have been able to live with it when divorce wasn't an option, but now when people have they think that being with someone else, these problems might not exist, that they could just live alone and not have to deal with these kinds of problems. So I hope that goes some way to explaining why I'm making this slightly bizarre video. So if you think I'm dead wrong, I probably am. In your specific situation, everything I'm saying might be completely unapplicable and not apply. But based on the number of sort of positive responses I got from my post on Twitter, I believe this is the case for some people at least. So I hope it was interesting at the very least. And I'll see you again soon. Thank you for watching.
Bestie, wake up!